Welcome to Chapter 7, Organizational Factors, the Role of Ethical Culture and Relationships. By the end of this chapter, you should be able to understand the concept of corporate culture, the influence on business ethics, how leadership power and motivation relate to ethical decision making in organizations. Assess organizational structure and its relationship to business ethics, explore how the work group influences our ethical decisions, and the relationship between individual and group ethical decision making. Corporate culture, as explained in previous chapters, it's all of our values, our rules, our beliefs, the ceremonies that we believe are accepted. They're shared and circulated throughout an organization. As I've stated before, corporate culture is always defined by, implemented by, reinforced by your senior leaders. Sarbanes-Oxley's 404 requires that organizations adopt a set of values that forms a portion of their company's culture, and it's associated with your success or failure. That is what the corporate culture does. If you have a negative corporate culture, at some point you're going to fail, especially if it becomes so toxic that it impacts customers and investors, vendors, and other external stakeholders. Let's look at some of the types of organizational cultures. Apathetic culture is minimal concern for people or performance. Caring culture has a very high concern for people, but a minimal concern for performance issues. So, two examples: Countrywide has an apathetic culture. They seem to show little concern for their employees and their customers. Their culture was about encouraging unethical conduct so that they could be more profitable. Countrywide took a hit, right? They took a huge hit. With a caring culture, Ben & Jerry's embraces community causes. They treat their employees fairly. They expend a lot of resources to enhance the well-being of their customers. In an exacting culture, there's little concern for people, but high concern for performance. UPS, they have these high standards for employees, ensure maximum performance, consistency of delivery, and efficiency, because they're trying to hurry and get those packages to customers. But the concern for those employees are low. And morale is oftentimes deemed low. If you know anyone that's worked for UPS, if you work for UPS, the having conversations with current and former UPS employees, you can tell that there is a greater concern for performance than anything else. So what happens is that when employees feel like they're not valued, guess what happens to your packages? And so if many of you recall, UPS was having a huge problem with customers receiving packages that were destroyed, mangled, really beat up. And there was, footage of UPS drivers just throwing boxes. They just were trying to hurry up and meet deadline. And in addition to the fact that there's resentment for the job they're doing because there's no gratitude from the company. So there was, of course, some interventions, but it's still taking place. Maybe not to the same extent, but it's still there. With the integrative culture, there's a high concern for people and performance. And so Starbucks is an example of that. They always look for ways to expand and improve performance while also exhibiting a high concern for the people through community causes, sustainability, and their employee health care. When we look at corporate culture and ethics as a component, your organization's culture forms the basis of ethical decision making. And management has a sense of the culture that it might differ from that of your employees. The higher level managers need to monitor the values, traditions, and beliefs of the organization to ensure they represent the desired culture, because there can be a conflict between. Rewards and punishments imposed by an organization should also reflect the culture that top management wishes to create. If you are selective and discriminatory in your rewards and punishments, that will then set the tone for the culture. If you're fair with your rewards and punishments, it will reflect in the culture. If you are quick to punish and slow to reward, it will reflect in the culture. So top management must be very, very particular about that. We are looking at the difference between compliance and value-based ethics culture. Compliance uses laws and regulations to help create different codes and requirements of compliance, while values-based relies on the mission statement and defines the core values of the company and how both customers and employees should be treated. Differential association and whistleblowing. The first is an idea that people learn either ethical or unethical behavior while interacting with people who are part of their intimate personal groups. So that's your family and friends. That's where you first get that first level of association. Whistleblowers, you are legally protected and encouraged to report misconduct, and the laws that were enacted to help support you in this are the Sarbanes-Oxley Act and the Federal Sentencing Guidelines for Organizations, Criminal Fraud Accountability Act, and the Dodd-Frank Act. All three, of course, you can see are tied to fraud and financial services. The role of power in shaping corporate culture. Power is our influence that we have over the behavior and decisions of those that report up to us. And we have several bases of power: reward, coercive, legitimate, expert, referent. Reward is my ability and the power that I have to to reward you for a job well done or for doing what I say. Coercive power is my ability to punish you, to sway you, to manipulate you, to get you to do what I need you to do. Legitimate power is the actual authority that I have because of the title that I possess. Expert power is based on my knowledge. You have professors, geniuses that are given expert power. Referent power, that is usually associated with a lot of our religious leaders, things of that sort, where they're coming with a spiritual or holistic approach, and they've received great respect for their ability to connect with others on that level, and so that's an example of referent power. The Pope, for instance, right? Martin Luther King Jr., Mother Teresa, referent power. Motivating ethical behavior. We have ability to do this, and you can motivate your team members by playing a role in maintaining an ethical organization. And a product of motivation and ability is job performance. Our individual hierarchy of needs may influence our motivation and ethical behavior. And if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you can see, the very primal ones, the foundational ones that are at the bottom of the pyramid, are the ones that motivate us instinctively initially. Um, it's our basic needs for food, water, shelter, love, companionship, so on and so forth. Um, uh, Upwards of, you know, recognition. And after those basic needs and survival needs are satisfied, then relatedness needs and growth needs become important. But those first basic needs must be satisfied before those other ones really become pressing to us. We have two different types of organizational structures: centralized and decentralized. Centralized is the traditional, um, is the traditional method or model that we've grown accustomed to, where decision making authority is really concentrated at the top with your senior leaders. And codes of ethics specify the techniques used for decision making by management. There's distance between managers and decision makers that can lead to unethical acts. So you have to make sure that that the distance is not too great, with limited positive influence, or not too close, right, with too much negative influence. So it's making sure that there's a healthy balance. In a decentralized organization, that authority is delegated down the chain of command. So it empowers managers and employees throughout the organization to make decisions that don't require top level approval. It has fewer internal controls and uses shared values for the ethical standards. And there's ambiguity, excuse me, and a tongue tied today, in following a rule versus the spirit of rules that creates ethical challenges. So it's not saying that centralized is better or worse than decentralized or vice versa. What it's saying that in both of these structures, the senior leaders must play a healthy hand and role in making sure that you're not presenting and creating an environment that will encourage unethical practices. If you have it so centralized that I have to get approval from 5 different people before I can make a small, menial decision, what happens is you can start having people cut corners. You'll start having people lie and say they got approval for this or that, or they just start doing things without getting approval. The same token, in a decentralized organization, if there still has to be a sense of control in the fact that you can delegate the authority down the chain, but making sure that people are reminded as to the extent of their authority to make decisions. So just because I've given you authority to make decisions about ordering supplies does not mean that you have the authority to change out vendors or to stop a contract with a vendor, for instance. That may be something that's delegated to someone else in the organization. So it's making sure that there's still some boundary set, no matter which organization structure you have. We have different kinds of groups, a formal and informal group. In our formal group, those are our committees and teams, work groups. They assemble with an organized structure that is generally and explicitly accepted by the group as a whole. Informally, you have similar interests. You come together for purposes that may not be relevant to the goals of the organization, or it may very well be. There are group norms that are standards of behavior that we expect of each other when we're working in a group. It's just a common sense kind of thing but we make sure that we're clear about what those standards are. and the expectation to come together, to work together, to pull your load, to do your share, to give 100% to the group. And those are just some of the standards that you find, which is why a lot of people dislike working in groups, because they've had bad experiences where someone did not do their share. They were not cooperative. They did not align to the standards set by the group. Table 7.7 shows you a variation in our conduct as employees. 10% follow their own values and beliefs. They believe that their values are superior to those of others in the company. Those are your definite narcissist, right? Very self-absorbed. 40% always try to follow company policies. 40% go along with the work group. 10% take advantage of situations if the penalty is less than the benefit and the risk of being caught is low. So there's your potential criminal element right there. All four of these have issues, right? Because even those that always try to follow company policies, what if the company policies are unethical, right? Go along with the work group. So basically, that person can fall into the category of, well, everyone else is doing it, so I did it too. So all four of these categories, variations, can potentially be a setup to fail. Our control over our actions within corporate culture is important. Ethical decisions made within organizations are made by committees and formal and informal groups, not by individuals. And in bureaucratic organizations, you actually have limited knowledge about the basic rules and procedures of the company. So when ethical conflict is severe, you may have to decide whether to leave the organization, stay and deal with the aftermath. It can be a stressful situation to be involved in. So as you go deeper into chapter 7, as I've said in previous chapters, really reflect and consider the different scenarios that you have been involved with or that you knew about, and what you would have done differently, or what you learned from the decisions you made. If there were ethical conflicts, did you stay with the organization? Did you leave? Were you a whistleblower? Why were you encouraged or discouraged to be a whistleblower? How did it feel to be in a highly ethical organization or a highly unethical organization? Or could you not tell the difference? So this is a great way for you to really self-reflect and also look in the what's happening in the news, and what you're reading in newspapers and seeing on social media and in the TV, as far as what is happening in different organizations, including the government, and what ethical conflicts arise and what people within those organizations do. Do they stay and try to make the best of it? Do they stay because they have their own agenda? Do they leave because they just cannot bear what they're seeing on a day-to-day basis? Or do they leave because they don't want to get caught up in the storm that is bound to hit that organization? So there's always motivations for both staying and leaving. With that, if you have any questions, you know how to reach me by email. Thank you.